This week's quote comes from Brene Brown, who is a wonderful LGBTQ plus ally and is an American academic and podcaster who has done a lot of work about courage and vulnerability and shame and empathy and leadership, and really has done a lot of work as far as human connections and how they work, and is a big supporter of LGBTQ plus folks. So I wanted to share a quote from her this week that goes along with a lot of what we talk about on the show all the time, but kind of specifically this week. All right. So Brene Brown, in her book, The Gifts of Imperfection, which I love that title because nobody's perfect, right? The Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown. She said this: owning our story and loving ourselves through that process is the bravest thing we'll ever do. God, I love that. Owning our story and loving ourselves through that process is the bravest thing that we'll ever do. I just relate so much to that, not only in my own personal life, just because it's like, I had heard so much growing up, oh, well, who you are is wrong and you can't possibly be this. And, sort of all this self-hatred and stuff that built up. Because of that, own my story, learning to love myself and learning to love myself through that whole process. It's so powerful. But then also because of, people who I work with each and every day, coming up with financial plans for them in their individual situation, it's so important to do that, right? Like come up with plans for people in their individual situation, meeting people where they are. Not only is it my fiduciary responsibility to do that, right? That's what I do. I work in my client's best interest, in your best interest, if you would choose to work with me. But your best interest, not my own. That is, number one, what I am doing and what I have to do, but what I would do anyway, right? Even if it wasn't my fiduciary responsibility, it's the kind of person that I am, is meeting people where they are and working in the best interests of those who I work with and on behalf of. It's my thing. And it's why I love doing what I do in large part, right? And so there's that part of it, but then there's also, the part that is kind of the bravery part of this quote. It's not always the easiest, especially when society has told you that you're wrong or that you are less than or any of those things. It's not easy to be someone who is easily trusting. It's not easy to be someone who is considers themselves brave. It's not easy rather to be someone who loves yourself because of all those outside factors. But the thing that we can do is just own our own story, accept ourselves for who we are, and then love ourselves through that process. That's true bravery. That is absolutely true bravery. And Brene Brown says it so well there. And it really goes to a lot of the different things that we're going to talk about today. Because, just in a lot of ways, living as an LGBTQ plus person today and throughout history really is such a brave thing. Literally just accepting who you are, right? And loving yourself through the process. You also have to do that when it comes to planning for your retirement as an LGBTQ plus person. It's not like that is something that happens in a silo. It doesn't happen isolated from everything else. It's part of your overall picture as a human being. And we all want to get to that place where we can retire. We can retire with confidence. We can retire with pride, right? We can plan for our retirement years with a sense of knowing who we are, owning that, and with a sense of love for ourselves and for our loved ones. And so we're going to talk a lot today about legal protections and the benefits that go along with being LGBTQ plus here in the US today, and what they kind of boil down to when it comes to planning for retirement and how that affects you in your retirement. Because, legal protections and benefits have a big influence on retirement planning for LGBTQ plus folks. And they do affect areas like Social Security, inheritance rights, healthcare decisions, access to spousal benefits if you are partnered or have a spouse. And so number one thing here that we're going to kind of touch on is Social Security benefits. The recognition of same-sex marriages has been around for a while now. It was the Obergefell decision in 2015 by the Supreme Court that legalized marriage, same-sex marriage across the country, across all 50 states, legalized the recognition of it in all 50 states. And, before that, my husband and I we were married in New York in 2011. And then we actually moved for a short time to Florida, where we literally had no rights. And I don't know about you, I don't want to go back to that. Personal. Some on the Supreme Court might be saying that, oh, we need to revisit that decision because, was that the right decision? Yeah, first of all, it was. Secondly, we don't want to go back to that. We don't want to go back to a time when, our relationships were seen as perfectly 100% legal and recognized in one part of the country, but then you cross the state line and you don't exist as a couple. You're not recognized as a couple. My husband, I think he's talked about it actually when he was a guest on the show here several weeks ago, that when we did live in Florida and we had no rights as a married couple at all because it wasn't recognized there at the time, that he had to go to the hospital. He had kidney stones and had to go to the hospital, to the emergency room. And thank God it was a situation where he was conscious and could sign a form saying that I am, allowed to be back in with him, and that I, have this status in his life. I am his next of kin, and all of that, and that I can make decisions and go back and be involved. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to go back with him in the emergency room. I would not have been recognized as anybody who had any say at all, even though, yeah, I was his spouse. So yeah, the recognition of same-sex marriages has been around, and it's enabled spouses who are LGBTQ plus to access Social Security benefits, including spousal benefits and survivor benefits. But those who were not able to marry previously, before legalization, may have missed out on those benefits for the years prior, and even for years after, if you either have been maybe in a domestic partnership situation, or just a living arrangement that's not a spousal relationship, for example, something like that. You've been missing out on those benefits, and that can impact your retirement income even after your spouse is gone. God forbid that spouse passes away. You are kind of stuck with whatever you have benefit wise if you are not married, if you're not legally married, or if that somehow gets overturned, or something like that happens, you have no sort of legal recourse to get an uptick in your benefits if that spouse had a greater benefit paid out monthly than you did, because spousal benefits for Social Security